Episode 28 of the Interpretation Station is Call to Order. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode. We're going to be in the world-famous Wham Bam Thank You Roland format. This is going to be a statement, so it's about a statement I posted on the LinkedIn Interpretation Station group last week. If you recall, it was by Panama. It was 6 days ago. It was Panama in the Advisory Committee on Human Rights. The subject matter was new and emerging digital technologies and human rights, and this was on the 17th of February. And I see that I noted down in my post on the Interpretation Station that this was delivered fast with crap sound. Very eloquent. I do remember it, actually. It was very nice. It was via video live via the platform, and it was breaking up, and the lady was speaking very fast, so it was quite tricky to do, and there's a lot of interesting vocabulary. Very relevant vocabulary in this statement. So without further ado, let's get down to it. So you should see me now, is the text coming up on your screen, and let's take you through what I did. So the first thing you'll know, I start off here, okay, grupo de redacción. This is, just a standard sort of formulation for one of these sort of groups within, within the UN, and I'm sure they call in many other organizations a drafting group, grupo de redacción. Now, okay, a lot of this is all about armas autónomas. Now, here I've given you, so we call it in English, autonomous weapons. Now, I say here, okay, I've put in brackets AWs, the acronym, and I say if you can, give the full name and acronym, and then you can just use the acronym later in the statement. Now, the thing with AWs, we're going to call them, I haven't done that many meetings yet on this subject, right? So there's such a thing as lethal autonomous weapons. Now, they are called laws when they're lethal, and that is a sort of accepted terminology. Now, autonomous weapons, I guess the difference between AWs and laws, I guess autonomous weapons won't necessarily kill you. Now, bit of a silver lining there. So I would hedge my bets if I was to hear this. Now, it's a tricky thing to say, autonomous weapons, and you're going to save a bit of time if you can use the acronym. So just to make it clear to everyone that you're going to be using the acronym, I would try and say, with respect to drones and autonomous weapons, AWs. So that prepares the listeners that, later on in the text, you're just going to be using the acronym AW. So that's just a little trick with certain potential, with certain constructions that you're not certain how often the acronym is used. You can sort of point the listener in the right direction. I remember, for example, I once had, there was a meeting about indigenous people, and they kept on about indigenous people. Big mouthful, and I was really getting tired, and I said at one point, indigenous people, IPs. It's maybe, I don't know if it's entirely politically correct, always, I was a bit desperate at the time. I was really feeling it, and so I thought, okay, it's going to be just much easier for me just to say IPs. And then you've got something similar with persons with disabilities. PWDs, you can sort of get away with using them, with using that acronym. So sometimes, you have to make the call yourself. I think as I said in this meeting, I said autonomous weapons, AWs. Okay. Moving on to the next paragraph. Okay, suponen el empleo, los desafíos que suponen el empleo, posed by, challenges that are posed by the use of weapons. Okay, so here I do give the acronym Armas Autónomas, AWs, en escenarios distintos a los conflictos armados. So the use of AWs in scenarios other than armed conflict. Okay, now then down here, okay, mantenimiento del orden público. So here, this is basically, it's law enforcement, maintenance of public order. But that, again, that basically boils down to law enforcement. And then I put the brackets around the mantenimiento because it's sort of redundant. Law enforcement, it's speaks for itself, really. You don't really need the mantenimiento. Okay, this word's very important. It will be very important in the brave new world that we're living in. Vigilancia, surveillance, basically spying on you. That's going to come up. That's going to be used a lot, I suspect, in the years to come. Okay, then we had el control y administración de fronteras, and I've bracketed administración simply because I think when we say in English border control, again, that covers both the notion of control and administration. I think it all falls under the sort of notion of border control. This is just a reminder of one of my sort of favorite words, la lucha contra la trata de personas, combating, okay, as opposed to the struggle against. I mean, you can say the struggle against, but combating sounds much slicker. Okay, and then now this paragraph is full of interesting vocab coming up. Okay, existen drones dirigidos por inteligencia artificial. Okay, so what does one do with a drone? One guides it. They're guided. Okay, that's why I just put that in for dirigidos. Now AI, I say here in the brackets, you can go straight for the acronym here. I think the concept of AI is sufficiently well known now that you can just say AI and everyone will know about it without you having to introduce it by saying, artificial intelligence, AI. Just go for the AI. Now this whole construction here, sistemas capaces de disparar dardos de electrochoque. Okay, so this whole notion, this is basically tasers, okay? Now it's interesting, I actually looked up on the dictionary to see if in Spanish they say los tasers or something. I mean, I went to word reference, and in word reference they give in the Spanish pistola de descarga eléctrica, pistola paralizante. So I'm wondering, in Spanish, do people use the word taser, or do they give this more slightly lengthier description of what it is? Now, obviously, when you hear this, when the person starts speaking, sistemas capaces de disparar, you're not going to necessarily know that's going to be referring to a taser. You'll only perhaps twig that it's a taser when you hear the word dardos, and then say, okay, dardos de electrochoque, electroshock darts, which is effectively what a taser is. But anyway, so just watch out for that. If you start hearing talking about dardos electroshock, that's basically going to be tasers. And then we have other associated munitions here that are used by law enforcement. Okay, perdigones. I had to look this one up. Pellets. Proyectiles de pimienta, pepper balls, pepper projectiles, we can say as well. And then moving on. Okay, this is very high-tech stuff that we're looking at here now. Sensores, software de reconocimiento de patrones. So again, I looked this up. Now, I'd heard of facial recognition. As I say in the margin, facial recognition is more common in English, but there is apparently pattern recognition software as well. So I don't know, is that the same thing? Is it slightly different? So just again, be aware that have this on your radar at any rate. This new software. Okay, rastrear intrusos, so for tracking intruders. Okay, and then I put a big star here. That refers right down to the bottom where I say make a point of learning the vocab in this paragraph. Unfortunately, you will probably only hear more and more of it. Well, yes, exactly. I think the sort of, the way law enforcement all around the world is going, they're getting more and more armed to the teeth. There's much more, the whole use of also body cams, all this sort of stuff. You're going to be hearing a lot about the use of all this technology now for law enforcement purposes. It's not like the old days anymore, is it? At least like in London with the British Bobby, he didn't even have a gun on him. He just had his trusty old baton. That was enough to keep law and order in the mean streets of London back in the day. It's all changed now, though. Not his baton. We call it a truncheon. In English, we call it a truncheon. Well, we did. Now he's just got a big, hefty machine gun instead. Okay. Moving on. Okay, Derecho Internacional de los Derechos Humanos. So this, okay, international human rights law. That's a concept. Now it's funny. So there's the other one that often comes with it in a package, international humanitarian law, and for that you hear the acronym IHL. I don't know. They don't seem to use IHRL as much as an alternative acronym for this, but yeah. So just bear in mind, international human rights law, which is often accompanied by international humanitarian law. Okay, evaluar adequadamente here. So assess is always a better sounding word, I think, in English than evaluate. Okay, cumplir las estrictas exigencias. Okay, just meeting demands. All right, just it's always good to know these collocations always. Then here we had razonamiento humano. So I had to think about this a little bit. I think human reason doesn't sound quite right in English. I think then we would more naturally say human judgment, I think. Next paragraph, okay, violencia de género. This is a rare case in English where you actually need to throw in a word that you perhaps wouldn't need in Spanish. So this concept in English is known as gender-based violence in general. We don't tend to just say gender violence. It tends to be gender-based violence, which, by the way, sometimes there is the acronym GBV. I've heard that gets used quite a bit. So if you're doing a statement specifically about gender-based violence, you would perhaps say gender-based violence first and then go GBV. If gender-based violence is just one idea out of many, then you probably want to try and give it its full name. Okay, debido proceso, in English, it's it's a set term, due process. Okay, resultante, and then here we have decisiones automatizadas. Now, I put this in. This might seem straightforward, I put automated, but when I first heard it, if you haven't done this sort of subject matter in a long time, and you get these expressions, then you can confuse you. I think when I first heard it, I was like automatized. But obviously that doesn't sound right in English, does it? That's not a word. We say automated decisions. So that's the only reason I put that in, just to remind you that the specific terminology, automated decisions. Okay, comisión de crímenes atroces. So I've given you perpetration of atrocious crimes. I think you could also use the commission of atrocious crimes as well. I think perpetration sounds better, though. Okay, then this part again, I've just reminded you, armas autónomas, AWs. Okay, reprimir a los manifestantes pacíficos. Okay, so just first of all, okay, so there's I'm always tempted when I hear reprimir los protestas, for example. I always have I automatically seem to use the calc, like repress, and doesn't sound that good in English, to be honest, to repress a protest. We have, in English, we have these alternatives, these phrasal verbs, crack down on, clamp down on. So it's good to remember those two as a little package. They both begin with C, crack and clamp. So I think they sound a bit more natural than repress. Now, this is an interesting bit here. I've put in brackets, que salen a reclamar sus derechos. Now, I'm going to tell you why I've put that in brackets. So when I put something in brackets, it means you could probably leave it out. Now, I specifically remember this bit because I was falling behind here, okay? She was racing through, okay? Okay, so now she said, reprimir a los manifestantes pacíficos. She was maybe in the next phrase. She was already going menoscabar y violar la dignidad. So at this point, I took a decision to drop this little section, que salen a reclamar sus derechos. Now, why did I decide to do that? Now, I often tell you, there are shortcuts when you can drop stuff and so forth. But you have to be canny about what you can drop, okay? You need to make a judgment call each time. You can't drop stuff if it's going to change the meaning of a sentence or if it's going to leave out something important. In that moment in time, when I heard manifestantes pacíficos, reprimir, I made the judgment call that it already spoke for itself, the fact that they were protesters. They were already out. Okay, the idea of them claiming their rights. Well, that's what all protesters do. I mean, it doesn't matter if you might not agree with the cause that the protesters go out for, but whenever people go to protest something, they almost always protest. They feel they have a grievance. They feel that their rights have been violated in some way. So I took the decision as soon as I heard manifestantes pacíficos, peaceful protesters, that I could stop the clause right there and not lose any of the meaning, okay? So it's a cause for concern that AWs can be used to crack down on peaceful protesters. That, in English, makes perfect sense without me having to add peaceful protesters who go out to claim their rights, okay? That bit was sufficiently redundant, I thought, that it could be left out, and that I could hurry on then to go así como menos cavar and so on to catch up with her. Okay, so when I tell you, there's certain things you can skip and miss out, you've still got to be, as I say, canny. You've got to be smart about what you can drop. So let's look. Only drop stuff where you won't really lose any of the flow of a sentence. Okay, you just got to think smart when you drop things. Okay, so moving on. Los apatridas, stateless persons. That's an important notion to be familiar with. There's no real alternative to that. Okay, same in French, les apatrides, stateless persons. Entrecruzarse, adverse impactos pueden entrecruzarse. This is a very common phrase at the UN and politics. They intersect with, they cross-cut. Issues that are cross-cutting. They are the cut through different subject areas. That's the idea. So in French, they use the word transversal. So this is, this is a good word to know when you hear like entrecruzarse, intersecting. Okay, they cut across. Okay, sin dejar de lado, you could just see here as well as. It's not. I guess it really means like not to mention also. You can just compact that down to as well as. Very important notion here, actores non estatales, non-state actors. This is, again, a notion that's becoming increasingly prevalent. You have, with all in all these countries where you have these insurgencies going on, these sort of self-declared mini states in various parts of the world. They are known those entities as non-state actors. They're not recognized as being states. And sometimes you hear them referred to as NSAs as well. So very important that you know that idea, non-state actors. And then just at the end here, Comité Asesor, this is just the committee that this statement is being delivered in. It's called the Advisory Committee. Okay, so as I say, some really good vocab in that text. Like I said, I think some of that vocab is going to be used only, it's going to become increasingly prevalent as we go forward. Okay, well, I hope that was helpful for you. I hope you enjoyed that little review, that little commentary. If you liked it, smash the thumbs up button. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, join the famous the Interpretation Station LinkedIn group. So in the LinkedIn group, I keep like an archive of all the statements, annotated statements I've done. You've got all the links to the videos on the YouTube channel, and we'll be back for more later on in the week. Yeah. So there's going to be a Spanish tutorial coming out at the end of the week. It's going to be from the UPR, Universal Periodic Review, by Cuba. The Cuban Venezuela, you can always guarantee they have the most vivid statements, shall we say, the most enjoyable ones from all the Spanish-speaking countries. So you've got that to look forward to. So that's it for today. So all I'll say is that episode 28 of the Interpretation Station is adjourned.